Hey, welcome everybody. Excited to be here today with Dr. Matthew Alberts, and we're going to be talking about his new book just released, the Gen AI Manufacturing Revolution: Smarter Factories, Enhanced Products, and Reduced Costs. Thanks so much for joining us today, Matthew.
Oh yeah, no, great to be here with you, Sean. I appreciate the time today.
So we wanted to go through a few questions from our readers that would really be helpful from our industrial AI Nexus who are interested to know more about some of the aspects of the book. So if you could give us a little bit about, first of all, we wanted to talk about strategic vision, kind of defining the revolution. And particularly, you distinguish between generative AI and around agentic AI. And so, looking at, for instance, where you work on the daily at the Southern Company or any heavy manufacturer, where is their first dollar being invested for AI? What makes sense, and which of those two kind of types promises the fastest or most measurable ROI, in the near term between generative and agentic? So, kind of where's the investment start, and between those two different types of flavors of AI?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question, Sean. I think for a lot of industries, right? We're talking about heavy industry, manufacturing, utilities. I think a lot of things started with around predictive analytics, right? We go back in time, simple regression modeling, but we got into enhanced predictive analytics. And that kind of built more towards the agentic side of things, right? Like defining reasoning from data. When I think about it, though, you get to that autonomous optimization, predictive maintenance, that process control that I think can yield more of that rapid, measurable ROI. Whereas, but we have a lot of push into the LLMs, the generative AI side of the world, right? Where I more think of generative AI as more of that creativity side of things, design can be transformative, but often I think it shows return more over a longer cycle, right? Now, in my book, I kind of explain agentic AI as enabling that real-time autonomous decision making, where I think that it can shave down downtime, energy usage in complex plants. For example, I'll give you an example. In a steel production facility, right, agentic AI system could easily cut energy use by 15%, reduce downtime by as much as 30%, and that over one factory or many factories, right, you'll see millions of dollars saved. Very quick, measurable ROI. Now, if I contrast that to generative AI, which I can still believe that it can accelerate innovation, right? New product concepts, but it's usually things that benefit and accrue later over time, right? So in practice, I think manufacturers, utilities, they fund pilot projects, AI driven grid balancing or machine analytics first because the gains are more immediate. Whereas generative AI, the more the creative side of things in our model, more fuels that rapid idea generation. But again, I go back to agentic AI as being that more promise of precision and efficiency that typically pays off faster, in under 18 months.
Great. That really helps you kind of lay it out. And I love that different use cases. So if we look at it then from like manufacturing energy, these are massive industries. They involve, multi-billion dollar, multi-decade assets. So we have both legacy assets and new assets that are being built to handle the infrastructure that's going to be needed for data centers, AI, as we move forward. So as we look at the capex side of the planning cycle, should companies be designing their new factories or upgrades to their current assets around an AI first operating system in mind? How does something like that look?
Yeah, I think that multi-decade asset really is complicated by the time we live in with the fast-moving tech, right? I think we've talked about in the past, like the concept of design for reliability has always been there. Now, obviously, when you were thinking about upgrading a plant or building a new facility, usually design for reliability gets thrown out the window as a cost savings measure early on in the in the review process. And now we've started talking about, and Sean, you know very well, design for robotics, right? So how robotic systems can get around facilities, right? Whether it's quadrupeds or tracked vehicles, magnetic crawlers, right? How they navigate different infrastructure inside facilities. Well, I think of it now, and how the book kind of pushes it is, we need to design new factories or plants to be AI ready. It's not so much we need to have AI ready for that plant. We need it to be AI ready. And what I mean by that is we need to embed the flexibility and data infrastructure for those new facilities. And so, yeah, the new facilities should include and have robust IoT sensing devices, right? High speed networks, cloud edge interfaces, digital twins. But again, it's all aimed at to where AI tools can be added over time easily. I think importantly, what this does then is when you have an AI breakthrough, right, an AI driven breakthrough at one site, I can then propagate it across my other 20 sites very quickly. I think that's a problem we see right now is you have the concept of we have a lighthouse facility. Well, how do you take what you have at the lighthouse facility when it works and adds value, and how do you get it to 20 other facilities the next week? You don't, right? That's a multi-year long cycle to get one technology propagated across the whole fleet. And so that's where I would say all your factories need to be ready for AI to where you can take something that works one day and then turn around and deploy it the next week to the rest of the fleet. And I think they have to really treat CapEx as more modular, rather than a lockdown on physical fundamentals, but have that budget that's allocated for those continuous software upgrades. And you have to have that AI first mindset now. So when you make the plants more data centric and upgradable, but you got to do so pragmatically. And to me, the smartest strategy is to really future proof the assets again with that open architecture across the infrastructure. Prioritize scalable connectivity, right? I think we get locked in a lot of times when we say, hey, we got a new T1 line to the facility. Well, how do you prioritize scalable connectivity, not just in the network that comes into the facility, but also how it propagates across your Wi-Fi or across your network inside the facility as well? And then again, our AI gains will be across the fleet, across the industry, not just on a single static system in the future. And so to me, that's the biggest ways that how we kind of handle both the CapEx question, but also the focus on making our facilities more broadly AI ready.
Yeah, excellent about the scalability. I like that. And that is across facilities. So AI ready. So then if we look at that let's move from strategic to practical. So if we get the practical application, the energy nexus, we look at, like, for instance, let's talk about regulatory compliance. Do you see a role where, obviously energy manufacturing is heavily regulated? Is it possible that we could see where AI might be able to document and help proactively, predict or assist on issues that could occur from a regulatory standpoint?
Absolutely, right. I think that's where we think of Gen AI in this space around, AI can do a lot more than what we traditionally think around record keeping, right? I think it's where the power is, where it can anticipate those compliance issues. you know, by mining operational telemetry and maintenance records, right? AI can help us, an AI agent can help flag when processes start to drift upwards toward regulatory limitations. Typically, where the amount of data is too much for a human to review, or maybe we review it only once a month, and now we can have an AI system review it daily for us. Um, I'll give you this example. Let's look at a emissions out of a power generation unit, right? Now, if they begin to exceed that environmental cap, not only are you alerted when that happens, but can AI automatically adjust the controls to bring you back under that cap limit, right? And I think that's where you start to have that complete system of decision making and more of an agentic side of things of, well, yeah, we can start to predict when we think we might get close to an emissions limit, but then can we also have an AI agent on the back end that say, okay, if we do exceed it, can we control the process and get it back under as well, instead of relying on, an alarm flashing on an operator screen. So, my book emphasizes that, anything around AI and regulations have to align closely with those strict standards. We have to closely work with regulators to ensure that our AI systems, how we use them, do comply with the proper energy regulations and policies. Because remember, again, if we're talking about the energy system, right, we have to prevent disruptions, right? We can't afford to have energy outages anywhere across any utility in the country. But and so it's really about giving themselves that, in my mind, an always on type inspector, right? That always on agent that's constantly monitoring your processes and everything around how equipment runs, how your emission levels are doing, right? How your power generation processes are doing. And what's great is that it's continuously analyzing data patterns. Now, I'm not saying we don't already have, tool sets that are continuously analyzing these different patterns, but a lot of times you see them in silos, right? And you kind of decouple sometimes the process related from the product related data, right? And I think where you have that AI model that can basically bring all that data together and take so many different multiple inputs, that as we further go down this road, you have that use case around technology that can basically recommend those corrective actions before you get anywhere close to having an issue. And I think that's going to be the holy grail. And not only that, because it's an agentic AI system, it'll tell you exactly why and how it's going to solve the problem, right? So it's not about just giving you an alarm and saying, "Hey, I fixed it." It's going to tell you why you got the alarm and how you fixed it. So I think that's the side of things that I'm most excited about.
That's kind of an ideal scenario, right? To think about, we have things that can do the monitoring, we have things that can do the inspections, but to actually take that and be able to then describe how to solve it, most efficiently and timely. Yeah, that I can see where that would be the game changer. Well, thinking about that, kind of the next step, looking at, say, like grid optimization. So that's a big more of a challenge, right? As we have so much complexity with the modern grid, intermittent renewables, localized microgrids, massive new industrial loads, from, to say, data centers or EV factories. So is there a way that we think, you see that AI might be deployed to help kind of optimize the grid as we move forward with so many variables?
Well, yeah, right. And I think that grid modernization, grid optimization challenge, right, is both a physical hardware and an AI issue, right? It's not just about applying AI to the data, right? We got to do some hardware issues as well. But really, AI is already indispensable in grid operations, right? I have a couple areas in the book I detail about AI systems analyzing the weather, the demand, grid sensor data. Right, you're predicting surges and optimization for distribution. Literally trying to reroute power in real time to keep the lights on. And again, like you mentioned, well, we have volatile loads, right? Our energy infrastructure in the country has shifted dramatically from what it was 30 years ago, right? Less coal-fired plants, more natural gas plants. We have huge wind and solar farms now across the country. And well, where we had a lot of volatility and adaptability to control those coal plants for power swings, well, natural gas and wind and solar doesn't necessarily operate. I can't immediately make more wind power to make more wind, or I can't tell the sun to shine for an extra 5 hours a day. And with nuclear facilities and the massive amounts that they generate, I can't tell it to produce more power necessarily, right? I get my standard load, and that's what it likes to run at. So, but definitely, like AI's ability to forecast critical. I look at a solar farm, and I think of, okay, how are we adjusting how we discharge battery power from those solar farms, right? Based on what's the predicted weather patterns for the next day, for the next week? Are we having storms roll in? Are we having clouds move in? What's our solar production going to be? Do we need to hold that battery in a state of hold, or can we discharge it to the grid, right? What does that grid need? And so, again, we've introduced so many more variables, every day, every week, right? We're introducing more variables. We have more data centers popping up here, there, and everywhere it seems to be. And you mentioned EV factories and battery factories, like big power consumers. And again, the goal is we keep the lights on for not just you and me, but also those industrial customers as well. And that agentic grid controller, right, that can instantaneously isolate faults, trigger those backup resources or battery discharges, or island microgrids as needed. And yeah, utilities are already piloting these AI agents for grid stability and grid modernization. And I think we'll continue to see faster and faster AI split-second decisions being made for our load and load shedding and network reconfiguration. And hopefully what we'll see over time is reduce our risk that our grids have today, right? And that makes our grids more reliable and more optimized for our, energy consumption, energy demand that we have today. But, we think about what the next 5 years is for the energy demand for our utilities, and, it's going to grow exponentially for us. So, yeah, we have to have an AI driven smart grid. I don't think we have any other choice but to do that.
Yeah, great point. And the variability will not slow down. Absolutely. And those are just a couple areas, talking about the regulatory and grid optimization. You cover many more in the book. And I think it's fascinating to see it's, not just theoretical about AI, what it, could do, it's being deployed, it's being used. And I think that's a big piece of it. So if we look at, moving from practical applications, now, of course, not just talking about the technology, but talking about the human and the organizational challenge, the culture, that obviously those things have to kind of be in place as well. We think of AI as a separate thing, as a technology, but the humans in the loop have to, be able to work with it and understand it and trust it. So let's talk a little bit about some of the cultural technical gap, that happens between, people in the IT area, right? Or like tech forward, very interested. And then we have people in the operational side of the business who maybe are not as used to working with some of the newest technologies and digital transformation. So what are some of the, more effective structures or models you've seen that hopefully kind of starts to secure that so that people can move forward with an AI deployment further in their company or scale?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. I think that goes to, how do companies need to structure themselves to address being able to take advantage of AI in the correct ways. And from what I've seen through my career and my ability to have, gone through stints with some big companies, but also consulted with so many companies out there, I've kind of seen the good, better, best, and worst of it all, right? And so really have a good handle of what I view as the correct way to do it, or well, we won't say the correct way. I hate saying I'm right and you're wrong, but let's say I've seen very effective ways to help manage this. And you're right, that OT IT OT divide, what in a sense you need a lot of translators, right, to translate between the two. But really, what I've seen the best is that cross-functional governance, right? And really usually around some type of AI center of excellence. And that AI center of excellence kind of spans across IT and OT. So, right. So I'm having the folks that are my data scientists, my cybersecurity experts, but I also have my control engineers, my frontline operators, right? All coming together to kind of bridge the gap of bringing together data scientists and process engineers, factory operators, the executives onto that unifying team to help roll out AI broadly across the company. And so it's, in one sense, it's a steering committee with, leaders from IT and OT to oversee those standards, right? The network segmentation, data quality, security, but also to ensure that machine side deployments, the OT side of it, do meet corporate IT requirements, but corporate IT also understands what OT needs from those requirements, right? And it can't be like, hey, this is how we've always operated in the past anymore, because we're in a state of change and we have to adapt to the technology now, not force technology to adapt to us. And so, really across OT and IT, right, it's that shared accountability, right? We talk about ownership, but it's that shared ownership, because if we both own something, we both drive something forward. And so, yeah, IT handles that infrastructure risk management. OT provides that domain expertise. In my book, I also mention company-wide AI task force being formed, teams with representatives from various key departments, right? IT, marketing, operations, HR, that are really meant to align strategies. But in short, we want to dissolve silos. We always talk about silos with data, but we also have silos with people. And if we don't have integrated governance bodies that span across those different groups, we're still going to be met with silos where IT says one thing and operations wants to do something else, and you don't have that mix. So you're constantly battling each other. And we always say IT throws up so much red tape, and it's red tape for a reason, right? But again, if you can't work closely with your partners, right, you don't understand the reason for that red tape or how to make those red tape IT processes faster. And so, you know, to close it out, I think there's no one size that fits all, but in my mind, the best practice is that structured collaboration, building that common playbook that's jointly owned by IT and OT, with, of course, that C-level, C-suite support on how you want to adopt and deploy those AI systems across the company.
Makes a lot of sense to bring a handful of people together, but across the enterprise. That does, because that really leads to our next area around people in, obviously, manufacturing, in energy, utilities. We have a lot of folks, what we call like frontline workers, right? These are the folks who are out there in the industrial workforce: welders, machine operators, linemen, who basically their job every day is reacting to machines. In essence, what does the machine or the asset do that they then need to deal with? Repair, maintain, what have you, monitor. And then now we're asking them to kind of collaborate with machines, with AI possibly being an interface or a tool that they're using. So, do you have any other things around kind of talent transition or talent strategies to try to help those frontline workers really adapt to this new world that we're entering into very quickly?
Yeah, I think my book, I advise training programs combining those technical AI skills with those soft skills as well. So to help those employees navigate the rapidly changing work environment that we have, right? And I think it's more of than embracing low code, no code options of, for example, like, hey, just about anybody can go create a chat bot with Copilot, point Copilot to a SharePoint directory and create a chat bot. It's not so much necessarily needing everybody to know how to do that. It's I need those frontline workers to know where AI could help and aid them in their jobs, right? I don't necessarily need them to be the ones to build the systems or know how to design the systems. I need them to know how to recognize and ask for systems to be built for them.
Mhm.
And I think that's where it's almost the terminology of I know enough to be dangerous. Well, on one hand, I need my workforce to know enough to be dangerous. I don't need them to do every bit of lifting, but we want to be able to, again, help them navigate these rapidly changing environment. Right, everything from basic machine learning concepts, the human AI interaction that they are most likely driving towards. Um, and I think these programs need to be very much role specific. But what's great about AI can help us tailor this type of training to role specific. So, right, what I deliver to welders and technicians, right, where I might want to again certify them in robotics or AI systems, what I give to linemen and operators might be completely different. But it will leverage learning that uses augmented reality and different AI guidance tools to help them through this. And I think, again, the emphasis is going to be pushed on, we're pushing more for that collaboration, not so much on, I want them to learn how to code, right? I'm not going to teach them how to code Python necessarily, but I want them to be able to collaborate. Again, that IT OT pollination between the two groups needs to happen. And I talk about a couple use cases in the book that companies have offered different apprentices or workshops where frontline workers, actually do use and develop and test AI tools before they're fully implemented. So again, we want to help with these frontline workers build trust in AI. It's better than, hey, I can't push a system to them. I need them to pull the system from me. And so involving them in the process of testing AI and testing systems helps build the trust. And I think that's a big key piece of why, the training and upskilling of these individuals is going to help them build trust in the system.
Those are all great points, and I love the idea of getting people involved and putting parameters to specifically help them in their roles. So it's not just AI for AI's sake, but this is how it will benefit you, and you can benefit your career by adapting to this. So that helps. And you mentioned just dangerous enough or just know enough to be dangerous, which is a great segue to our next question. hidden risks, which is, you allude in the book to hidden risks no one's talking about. So I'm kind of curious, beyond data security, model drift, what do you think is the single most underestimated risk that industrial leaders need to be preparing for right now or concerning themselves with around AI adoption?
Yeah, in my mind and from the book's perspective, right, it's misalignment and complacency, right? In other words, rushing into these AI projects with, out a clear strategic anchor, right? I think companies often get swept up by the hype to deploy technology for its own sake, right? Only to find out that it doesn't solve the key problems, or they think ChatGPT is going to be their magic button to solve everything, or is going to be the magic AI is. And um, I highlight in the last part of the book of what leaders must ask is, they first have to ask, why AI? Why do we want to use AI? Instead of saying, hey, what AI are we going to use? And I want to risk wasted investment and disrupted operations, right? Because without oversight, right, this erodes trust of AI systems. Because if an AI system, say, recommends a change that doesn't tie into any business objective or business value, right, managers ignore it, or they fear it, they don't trust it. And I think what you see and what you get to, I think that's where we're at in the state of AI today, is we kind of end up in pilot purgatory. And, so I don't think it's anything to do with the technology. It's just, again, I think misalignment and complacency of, are we, automating to automate for automate's sake? Are we automating bad processes that we don't know are bad or we've never tried to make better? And we're saying, hey, let's go ahead and automate that. And are we saying, again, we're rushing to have a news article put out that we're using some AI tool to transform our business, right? Because we want that blurb in the news and we want to make, stock price go up at 10% because we're doing something with AI. I think I think sometimes hidden risk can be also a governance and culture gap, right? Failing to align AI deployments to core goals, failing to define the success metrics, but also failing to equip your people to manage AI, right? I think that lack of strategic purpose can be more damaging than a buggy algorithm, right? I think everybody understands that AI might not be perfect out of the gate, but when you lack that strategic purpose, I think it undermines the whole entire effort. And so the book's advice really is about to proactively mitigate that by, again, enforcing and recommending rigorous planning around every AI initiative having that clear value case and the executive oversight to go along with it.
So those are great ways to look at those hidden risks, and they're certainly, I would say, probably what's stopping a lot of programs from getting out of that purgatory from their pilots and scaling. So, definitely we flip that script a little bit, Matthew, to more actionable advice. So if you're, advising the CEO of a mid-sized industrial manufacturer tomorrow morning, and, what's the one question they should immediately be asking their CTO or VP of operations to gauge their readiness or to help them avoid those hidden risks? What would be the questions that you think they need to deliver in order to avoid the risks that are out there?
Yeah, I think the kind of the single two-part question I'd recommend any CEO to go ask their CTO would be, what exact business problem is our first AI initiative solving, and how are we measuring its success? Because I think that forces the reality check, because I'm hoping the CTO answers with, a very concrete use case. Hey, we want to reduce downtime by 20%, and the key performance indicators that will be tracked are XYZ. In our book, we stress the importance of defining metrics from the outset, right? So KBI should be established to provide that measurable benchmarks, for that pilots or for that initial performance. And I think really what you see back is that if you get a very vague answer, or an answer that's focused on the technology piece rather than the value, that gives me the signals for unreadiness, right? By contrast, a very well prepared leader, right? That CTO should directly be able to point you to some type of dashboard or report showing you, hey, this AI agent's already helping us cost savings or reduce, costs and saving hours, right? We're anchoring that to revenue, to uptime. That's what you want to see, as an answer back to that. In practice, asking this type of question about use cases and its ROI metrics ensures that the organization isn't just there chasing buzzwords. I think that's very easy to do because we can't not use buzzwords in this industry, right? We talk about AI and uptime and agentic and generative, and so we can't just not talk about the buzzwords, but we have to make sure that a company isn't just chasing those buzzwords. And I think it helps align everyone on what that North Star is, for an AI success, and really allows you to understand is, do you have the governance, the data, the talent in place to get you there? And I kind of summarize the end of the book, but, define the value first, then define the tech to get you that value.
Yeah, I think that definitely makes sense when you look at the idea of making sure that it's, meaningful, that you're putting something behind a meaningful business process or problem, and measurable. So that definitely seems like great advice for that CEO or someone entering into this challenge. Last question, but one of my favorite to ask is, you wrote the Gen AI manufacturing revolution. And what was your impetus? Obviously, we know that innovation and emerging tech have been part of your life for several years. But what made this book something? Because we know that anything that you take the time to do is going to take quite a bit of time. And so I was curious, what was kind of your impetus behind it?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, Sean, I've had the pleasure of going and working with so many different companies, so many different groups of leadership out there on a wide variety of different technology, Industry 4.0 type projects. I started to see a common theme develop, and that's really what I think we saw in the report put out by MIT a few weeks ago. Well, hey, we're spinning our wheels on this thing called AI, right? We think it's something great, but we're not putting the horsepower behind it that we need to for companies. And I think it's kind of how we've kind of pushed technology, over the past couple decades of where your C-suite level folks will kind of put somebody else in place to say, drive my cloud adoption or drive by this adoption, right? They don't take the time to get smart on the technology. And I think when we talk about how AI can be so transformative for a company, especially in manufacturing, in the highly competitive nature manufacturers are in, this is more than just some small IT group doing something transformative, right? This is a technology that can broadly impact every facet of operations for a company. And if the C-suite leadership doesn't understand that, and they need to know more than just to be dangerous, right? They have to have a level of understanding of this technology and how to manage to it, adjust expectations to it, but also drive value from it differently than they have in the past. And that's a gap that I saw out there in industry of companies were just not embracing AI in the correct fashion, the correct way. And my goal was, well, hey, I can only go talk to so many people, right? I can only go meet so many people. I can only go have these conversations with so many people. So, hey, let me codify this. Let me put it in a book. I often refer to this as like a playbook for how you need to structure your company to take advantage of AI in the correct way. But I hope it's looked at as that. Again, there's never an easy button out there, right? If it was easy, everybody would do it and it wouldn't be true change, right? We recognize this is change and it's going to be difficult for us to do. And I hope my book allows you and allows readers to see different ways that they can go about, adjusting and transforming their companies to allow them to take advantage of AI in the way that, well, one, we think it can provide value to us, but that we know it can provide value to us.
The playbook for industrial AI. Love it. And certainly one of the ways that we're going to be helping you, Matthew, to get the word out to a few more people will be coming up November 12th at our Industrial AI Forum in Houston, Texas, where you're going to be sharing both in a workshop setting and on panels about some of these key areas around the book and practical applications and use cases. And we're really looking forward to having you out with our audience next month.
Oh yeah, no, that's going to be a great event there at the Ion in downtown Houston. I'm looking forward to that, Sean.
It's going to be good, and we're looking forward to having you out. Also, want to make sure I mention that people can look in the comments. We're going to have a link to where you can go to get your own copy of the Gen AI Manufacturing Revolution. So we'll put that out there, as well as Matthew's LinkedIn. So if you want to connect with him directly. Thank you so much for your time today, Matthew. We really appreciate it.
Oh, you bet, Sean. I appreciate this, and thank you again for your time, and hope we can do this again soon.
Awesome. Sounds good.